Chair recognizes the member for Marco City.
Bring it on.
Mr. Speaker, it is an honor to have this opportunity to speak to our people by way of you on this 2019-2020 national budget. Mr. Speaker, I am largely here due to the various intervention by a number of people prior to the last general election. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am principally here in large measure due to the tremendous support of the residents of Marco City, who gave me a mandate to raise their concerns and use the national platform to help them and their children fulfill their dreams and aspirations. I want to say thank you to every resident in Marco City. Thank you for your trust and your confidence. Daily, I, along with the Marco City team and friends of Marco City, will continue to work tirelessly on your behalf and with you. In Marco City, our team is made up, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of persons who support all three of the political parties. Bahamians, committed to a better Bahamas and the restoration of not only Marco City, but Grand Bahama in general. Mr. Speaker, when you come into my office, whether it was during the election and since the election, you would see the pictures of former members of Parliament. Among the pictures are pictures of persons who represented the Free National Movement, as well as who represented the Progressive Liberal Party. We wanted to engender in our campaign this notion that we ought not dismiss any Bahamian, but to underscore the point that governments are continuous. And when given an opportunity by our Prime Minister to serve at the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture, I mandated that we put up the pictures of all former ministers in that ministry, again, to take a stab at reducing the tribalism that has become all too popular in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, we believe that at the end of the day, if the Bahamas is to be transformed, it is absolutely necessary for Bahamians from all walks of life, all political organizations, to find a way to collaborate in what is a arguably difficult task of building an archipelagic nation stretching 100,000 square miles with more airports and points of entry in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas than all of the Caribbean. It is a difficult country to govern. And if our people are to fulfill their dreams, not just for them, but for their children unborn, it is necessary to have the collective effort and wisdom of Bahamians working in tandem with each other. And so, Mr. Speaker, it is against this backdrop that I sought in 2017 to try once again to represent our people. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have tremendous challenges in the Bahamas today. Tremendous challenges, but also tremendous opportunities. And clearly this administration appreciates that we must work on both fronts simultaneously. It is difficult for all members of this place to make the level of sacrifice that are made and maintain balance in life, particularly those who have constituency as well as other major portfolios. None of us would be able to do this with any real measure of success and true fulfillment if we did not have supportive teams in our respective constituencies and, more importantly, supportive families. Against that backdrop, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wish to thank my wife, Burleys, my daughter, Michaela, who make sacrifices right along with me in making me, as other spouses have made, available to this country, their partner to do work on this country's behalf and in conjunction with the constituents who we represent. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I am not alone. I'm not an exception in this place when I say that I love helping people and being a part of creating solutions. I'm no exception. I absolutely, Mr. Speaker, love empowering people. I believe and have believed since a young student at A.F. Adley Senior High School that I was called to empower people. Back then, unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, I was not necessarily doing it in the most positive way, having been suspended at A.F. Adley 3 times, expelled on the 3rd time. Transferred to R.M. Bailey, who did not accept me, and I returned to A.F. Adley on the basis of my mother's character. I believe in fighting for people. Mr. Speaker, from very young, I understood my purpose, my calling. When I lived in Mount Pleasant Village, I was a part of a youth association. And Mr. Speaker, there are several members in this place who hail from that area. North Eleuthera, St. Barnabas, Mount Moriah. And of course, by way of marriage, North Abaco. Mr. Speaker, while in Mount Pleasant, 2 of the executives, Minister Dames and myself, we wanted light on the park in Mount Pleasant, and we couldn't get a reasonable explanation or suitable action from the then Member of Parliament. And as young people unable to vote, we decided who we were going to support. From then, Mr. Speaker, I'm called, as many of us in here are called, to serve, and we love doing it. No particular group has a monopoly on loving Bahamian people and being touched by their infirmities. Others have gotten it through many means. In large measure, I believe, my mother, Sister Laura Hepburn Benson from Dowd's New Bike. Sister Benson from New Bight Island, you know, she's like that. She loves serving people. My father, now deceased, John Samuel Pintard from Ragged Island, he was like that. And I believe that God plays a role in birthing in us a desire to be different makers, world changers. Mr. Speaker, entering national politics, though I experienced, Mr. Speaker, a difficult and horrible road to this point, I remained in the arena. Mr. Speaker, I sought to serve the Bahamian people in and out of political season and have assisted some members of Parliament who are in this place when I was not on the front line. And I did so joyfully, and we made a difference. In Foxhill, for every home we could identify that was without inside plumbing and electricity, I was able to call on a number of people to help. During that period, Minister Simonet was extremely helpful and, I would say, unusually generous. And I say unusually because at the time we had no knowledge of who else he had helped. So it appeared to be unusually generous. And there wasn't a house. There wasn't a house that we could find on Step Street, Dorset Street, Adderley Street, Johnson Road, the other side of Fox Hill, where he did not represent, and we sought to help. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in this place, there are many persons who are touched by the affliction of our people. And it is utterly wrong for anyone to seek to give the impression that they have a monopoly on care and concern.
It's not what you say, it's how you say it.
It is utterly, Mr. Speaker, utterly untrue. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, in Marco City, I've had the privilege of working with men and women, Mr. Speaker, who, despite their own personal challenges, were prepared day in and day out to go and help people. We did it, Mr. Speaker, with no reference to color. We didn't ask what person's political persuasion was. And in case some would say, well, maybe that was because it was before the general election, ask anyone, it hasn't changed. We continue to help. Persons were going out to seek to deliver plywood, felt, shingles, to help people seal their roof so that there wouldn't be leakage, even when their roof was leaking at home. And when we discovered, we said, we can't have persons going out trying to make a difference when they themselves need intervention. And so we turned our attention especially to helping those who were on our team. We did it before the election. It's 2 years later, Mr. Speaker, and we're still doing it in Marco City, the most comprehensive hurricane relief program on the island of Grand Bahama, possibly in the country. But, Mr. Speaker, in helping, we don't need cameras to always be there to make a difference.
No.
So when some attempt to give the impression that they care, it is to deliver remarks is important. I will never underscore it. To verbally stand in defense of a people is absolutely necessary, and I applaud it. But not to acknowledge that there are others who not only speak, but are consistently, like Central Grand Bahama, day in and day out, like West Grand Bahama, who's spending personal money to help people.
Talk, man, talk.
It is utterly unfair and intellectually dishonest. And only those who don't know, and that's not many in Grand Bahama, Grand Bahamians know what time it is. Others from other islands may not know. But daily we are working not for accolades, not because we have any expectation or some hope that it will be rewarded in the next general election. I believe I could speak for my colleagues when I can say we care less about that. We are concerned about fulfilling the mandate the people have given so that we can work on their behalf right now in this moment with no real calculation for 3 years from now. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is not lost on many members in this House that when you do this work in national representation, you must do it as if unto God. You have no way of knowing whether all constituents would know or care. And sometimes, let us be honest, in the Bahamas, you are as good as your last good deed.
Amen.
That the day you are unable to deliver, sometimes people, because of their own pain and hurt, will forget or dismiss previous things that you have done.
Boy, preach.
But, Mr. Speaker, we still ought to do the best we can. And then we ought to recognize that we're not alone. So when one accuses others of arrogance, the greatest arrogance is to represent the false notion that you stand alone in being a martyr or having a messianic complex, that you are here as the savior of the people. It is untrue. It is untrue. It is untrue. And the truth of the matter is, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that no matter how exceptional any of the members on this side or the other side may be, their efforts alone are not sufficient to restore the communities they represent or transform the Bahamas. Our challenges are greater than any one prime minister, one gifted deputy prime minister, and all of the cabinet and members of parliament. There's a need for a collective will and effort to solve the challenges we face.
Right.
It doesn't mean that we cannot contest on the basis of ideas and discuss whether or not appropriate course of action is being taken by one party or another. But it is delusional to presume that one speech changes a nation, that one's exclusion from some segment of an organization makes the organization utterly unsuitable to govern. It is delusional. The truth is, if all of us cooperate and work in tandem with each other, we're still unfortunately going to lose some young people, which is painful. But can you imagine how many more we lose when we decide that we will not pull together? And that is why many members of parliament in this place have sacrificed day in and day out to work on behalf of their constituencies. That's why you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, has constructed 3 parks in a very short period of time, a remarkable accomplishment, and with a community center to boot. That's why others have created smart parks, and St. Barnabas works tirelessly, and Fox Hill continues to revive a proud tradition in the incredibly beautiful community of Fox Hill. That's why North and South Eleuthera call each minister relentlessly and pull no punches when they're advocating on behalf of their constituents. That's why they come in meetings, parliamentary meetings, and they speak truth to power. They don't always win the argument, but they are unfairful in presenting it. So, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, I am proud to be a part of a team that is on the right track.
So am I. So am I.
The speed, Mr. Speaker, isn't always what we desire. Let us be real. There's tremendous inertia sometimes in the system, tremendous lethargy. And so we have some work to do in terms of picking up the pace in some areas that are absolutely necessary. And can we dialogue more with stakeholders in some sectors that we seek to facilitate their interests? Of course, we have an obligation to do so. We are here by their good graces on their behalf to do their bidding. But, Mr. Speaker, anyone who can take 60 minutes and by the grace of a speaker get an additional 5 and can find no redeeming value in the collective sacrifice of men and women, not just who are here, but the thousands who work in tandem with the vision and worked on projects and policies outlined, but to dismiss the collective efforts of thousands of Bahamians of having counted for naught, clearly are not concerned about future credibility.
No.
Mr. Speaker, in Marco City, we run what we believe to be, in constituencies, the most comprehensive food program. And it's not lost on us. It's not lost on us. People would rather feed themselves. So that is not heavy lifting. Heavy lifting is facilitating persons' own empowerment so they never need the social assistance, either by the ministry or by us. So that's not lost on us. But we don't dismiss it and we don't turn away people who need help. We don't talk it, we deliver it. We have acquired a building through working with partners on Gambia Drive, adjacent to Mayfield Park. We intend, Mr. Speaker, to put together a comprehensive tech hub. We have been in discussions with the Grand Bahama Port Authority to acquire land just between Somerville and Kennedy in order to put in place a Central Park concept where persons can recreate, exercise, and of course, Mr. Speaker, where concerts can be held, where fundraisers could be held in order to support worthy causes. We are happy to be working with the Grand Bahama Port Authority. We express concern that we need greater urgency in us facilitating the acquisition of the land. We need to get this done so we can move on to a lot of other significant projects. In the same area, Mr. Speaker, we are going to construct in this term a multi-purpose Junkanoo shack, and we are happy to be working with veteran Junkanooers in the constituency who will have a space where they can sell cultural products, engage in performances for the community, create, whether they want to do whistles or drums or some other cultural instrument. We intend to provide a space where artists can record in a small studio the music of Junkanoo or any other creation in order to sustain their operation. Adjacent to it, we intend to build a multicultural center that would allow persons who are in the theater community to perform, to allow persons who are interested in engaging in dance and music to rent the studios from entrepreneurs who will own these spaces. We are also, Mr. Speaker, embarking on a project to create a food court and kids pavilion. Mr. Speaker, rather than talk about it, I thought it would make sense just to invest the money, and so the architectural drawings are well on their way, Mr. Speaker. And so this is drawing Nico Grant Jr. We are grateful to him, to Burton Miller, to all of the artists and architects who are helping us to help create this architectural wonder, this amphitheater. The only reason we haven't used Hiram Lewis is, of course, he's in frontline politics at the moment. We are grateful to designer Delicia Smith, who is also a part of the professional team that's assisting us. We want a kids pavilion, Mr. Speaker, that will include not only the traditional games for children, but also modern games as well. Mr. Speaker, we are anxious to get this going. And we want to do it in a creative way. We believe that residents of Marco City and others should invest in this and run this as income-generating opportunities. In that regard, I sought advice from at least 3 former members of Parliament who are very much engaged in community building in this country, and notwithstanding what some of their politics are, when I've called and asked their opinion on the construction of a park in Mayfield Park, they've all been generous in the advice that they have given, and I want to thank them. Thank them for the times I've been able to reach out to them, and they've been helpful. And just to make the point, to the Honorable Shivago Lang, former Member of Parliament, Marco City, the Honorable Greg Bethel, Morse, who I believe again was correct about the need for us to have legislation that save people's homes, because it is unacceptable that too many of our constituents are battling issues, some of them despite their best efforts to save their homes. And of course, to the Honorable Pleasant Bridgewater. And so this, Mr. Speaker, is the ground floor plan as well as the upstairs for the tech center, the building that we already have carriage of, and after the rezoning exercise will immediately commence construction. We're collecting the computers already and have a number of them in our possession, as well as iPads. And so we wish to move in a timely manner because we don't want to violate building control regulations, but I must confess I have been known to be impatient, and so we're praying that, Mr. Speaker, that things can move rather quickly. This is, of course, the food court, and so we want persons to get ready. Incidentally, Marco City has some of the best chefs and cooks I was going to say in the Bahamas, but that would really be an understatement. I was thinking the Western Hemisphere. And so, Mr. Speaker, we try in Marco City to create as many opportunities as possible. Not just as lunch vendors, which is important, but to create, as we did, the cultural fest so that vendors could make money. We paid for the entire infrastructure, the entertainers, the advertisement, the tents, etc., to give them an opportunity. So we believe the food court is going to do, Mr. Speaker, exceptionally well. We believe that along the East Sunrise corridor, bordering, as I've had discussions with MP Iram Lewis, we can create a cultural mecca, including Juice and Banji Outen's place, a social affair, including the Center Gumbe Line, including BAIC, including the Tomlinson Theater, and including what we're developing there. We can transform the area, and this we can add to the offering yet another performance area in the area for residents who want to learn music, who want to cut music in studios, etc. And so we believe that there are many opportunities for our residents. We've continued to invite ministers into Grand Bahama who've conducted town meetings to address a wide range of issues. So it's not just about social assistance, it's about empowerment, which is why we were committed to empowering contractors by putting them in contact with the regulators at Grand Bahama Port Authority who provided them with valuable information to make sure that they can run successful businesses. This is precisely why we brought in persons like Minister Brenzel Roll and representatives from NIB and the public service to answer critical questions to resolve issues that have long been unresolved. And we will continue, as we have done. We've held town meetings ahead of the hurricane in order to provide invaluable information for residents. We believe in empowering residents and making information available. We run a very effective job placement program and have been successful in high placement in the private sector, and we've had tremendous success in the government sector as well. We assist, of course, as many members of Parliament do, with resumes, with cover letters, doing any number of things, including helping persons with job readiness, assisting them in recommendations on how to dress and present themselves, why it is necessary to keep a directory of every company you have applied to, the names and numbers, in order to do follow-up. We've assisted with school fees, medical bills on a regular basis, plane tickets for persons to go and seek treatment. We've had the Minister of Health on speed dial, and he has consistently responded. And many of our ministers have done the same thing, calling the Deputy Prime Minister, who has made himself available to offer guidance, particularly since many of the entrepreneurs who we wish to help require the insight and the guidance of finance. And he has been there over and over again. Mr. Deputy Speaker, during last summer, we placed well over 150 young people in Grand Bahama on summer jobs, and we are on track to eclipse those numbers this year. Government, private sector, we have no difficulty petitioning, some in Bahamian parlance would call it begging, companies to employ our young people. And they have been responsive in the community of Grand Bahama, giving our young people an opportunity to be employed. We've prepared a report which we will gladly take to every door once they arrive. And we've done the traditional things, catered to well over 1,200 young people with back-to-school giveaways of school supplies. Mother's and Father's Day, we try to knock on as many doors, leaving a momentum, letting parents know that we absolutely appreciate them. Thanksgiving, we don't forget our seniors. We continue to work on behalf of our people because we love them, we care about them. Mr. Speaker, we had an interesting experience after the general election, and forgive me for not telling the whole story. This is only the first part, and we may need to give greater details if there's a chapter 2. But Mr. Speaker, some of us, Mr. Speaker, when we ran, I ran to become the Member of Parliament for Marco City. Marco City residents were never designed to be the stepping stone to some other personal ambition that I had. When I came into public life, I came fully defined as a human being, known by this community, for better or for worse, but known. And I came, Mr. Speaker, I came on my own terms, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And so, whatever the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas decided to do 2 years ago was irrelevant to me. I wanted to represent the people of Marco City. Whatever the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas decides to do as early as tomorrow is equally irrelevant to me. I ran to be the Member of Parliament for Marco City. I am honored that the Prime Minister reposed confidence in me and appointed me to the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture, and then later to the Ministry of Agriculture and Marine Resources. But my first obligation and my objective in participating in the election was to receive and then deliver a mandate of the people of Marco City. So I could never be upset with a decision made by a constitutional position that have the ability to make that decision for whatever reason. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to say to the residents of Marco City, I love you. I'm prepared to work on your behalf tirelessly and continue to not just be your voice, but practical help. Before the general election, and all of you, I believe, know that this was certainly the last shot. Despite the fact that I was anxious to be in this role, I was not prepared to be dishonest in the course of doing it. So I didn't sell people dreams. I didn't tell them I am your salvation. I didn't tell them that all the problems you have, when the F and M get in and I get in, oh, life is going to be completely different. I told them it was about partnership. Go back and check the tapes. It was about partnership. I said, if your roof is damaged, count on Marco City. We are your partners. If you need 25 sheets of plywood, we may not be able to give you all, but we guarantee you can get less than 5. We can do better than that. We were your partner. If you were running into difficulties and needing a place to stay, and social services was going to help, we were going to be one of the partners. The church had to be another partner. Your family and friends had to be another partner. But we were going to be your partners. That's one of the things we said. We never strayed from it. The other thing we did in Marco City, and I am so grateful to that team, the other thing we did, which we made it absolutely clear, we were not in the politics of demonizing. Let me be very transparent. We were not in the business of demonizing. Were we tempted? I certainly was. I've had some horrible experiences leading up to this election. I had some horrible experiences when I was in Kill Island, Rumkins, in Salvador. I had some temptations. So it wouldn't have been difficult to demonize some people, etc., but it would not have served the greater interest or the greater good. And ultimately, it wouldn't have served my good. And so the reality is, and I believe members opposite would remember the statement, but I was careful in talking to supporters of the Progressive Liberal Party, and there's a line that was played often, where I made the point that you ought to go and invite all your neighbors and bring them in and explain what our agenda is. And in doing so, you ought to be careful. Because not all F&Ms are good, and not all PLPs are bad. The statement went on to say that both F&Ms, PLPs, and DNAs were afflicted by the same common challenge, bad leadership by the former Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister. That was a statement. So I was very careful not to demonize persons who supported the Progressive Liberal Party and who supported the DNA, because all of us who have lived long enough have had some friendly fire at one point or another. And there would be intellectual dishonesty to give the impression that one group is bad and the other one, incidentally, your group is all good. Mr. Speaker, Marco City continues to have some challenges. And despite the tremendous cleanup efforts we had launched before, more needs to be done. We've identified all of the areas that require cleanup, and during the course of this month, we will resume that program. Mr. Speaker, we've worked with the Grand Bahama Utility Company and the Power Company to help residents, and we are grateful to those executives who have been understanding and have been able to work out payment plans for persons who are challenged. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I just brought with me one of the sheets that have been submitted to the Ministry of Finance. And knowing how thorough some folks are on the other side, the public is going to have a chance to see all of our sheets, by the way. Many of us have spent far more money in our constituency than the capital grant, as well as the small check that we get for being members of Parliament. And this is routine. This is routine. And it isn't true just of this side, it's true of the other side. Spend far more money. So it becomes absolutely ridiculous, phenomenally intellectually dishonest for folks to contend that, that a number of people who I know here have come to this place for an increase on what is actually, for many of us, a more than 50% decrease in our salaries. Now, if persons wish to tell the story about making more money than has ever been made, if they wish to tell a personal story, they should do so. But don't include me in that. Don't include me in that. And we do so because we have made a commitment. So Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have no idea if in 3 years I would be here. But what I do know is the commitment made to the residents of Marco City and by extension, Bahamians. Because the truth is, all the members of Parliament who will tell the truth in this place from Grand Bahama know that persons from all constituencies come to the Marco City office. And it's true, the reverse is also true for the other offices. People go everywhere for help. And so whether I'm here or not, I want to know that the commitment made I honor to people, and sometimes it means making additional sacrifice of personal resources to help, because the struggle is real for many families. And even when they run into you, I do the shopping in my family, so when they run into me in Solomon, and I have no difficulty paying for other people's grocery many times. And sometimes when people are upset, I have to pause, even though that soldier in me is quick to retort. I have to pause because I know some people are having a hard time. And then you have to listen, because this is what we signed up for. And you have to be responsive even though you wish to be defensive. And so we continue to make sacrifices because this is what we have committed to doing. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in Marco City, we run a wide range of programs. And over the course of the next few months, we'll be releasing audio-visual presentation of each of those items that we've worked on. And I'm proud of the work that you're doing in Marco City, and I'm grateful to every member of the team who continue to sacrifice. And I make no apologies for the multiplicity of contracts that we have participated in assisting you in getting. It doesn't matter whether it's small home repairs, and we've recommended, and you've been successful in that regard, both the recipient of the repair and those that have executed it, we are happy and proud to do. That's what we signed up for. And we have gone on the basis of meritocracy, people who have the capacity to do work. We are not going to facilitate the empowerment of somebody who's going to not deliver on behalf of the resident. We know of situations where contracts were given and people could not complete them.
Why would we do that?
And so we are committed to making sure that people succeed. And we'll continue to help Grand Bahamians in general, people in Marco City, without reference to what color you wore prior to the general election. Just recently, we've employed several persons. And I did get some criticism because of who those persons were related to. And I take the beating from some members of my team. But after a while, they calm down because they know the culture we are trying to create. They know we're trying to create a culture where we put Bahamians first. We are nationalists, after all. And so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we believe that when you work in the best interests of Bahamians, without reference to the tribalism that has historically existed, people will recognize it. Even if they don't support you, we create a kinder, gentler society. Mr. Deputy Speaker, let me pause on that for a moment. I wish to return to that, Mr. Speaker, because there are a few things I want to say about those that wish to characterize members of the government whose views differ from theirs as having no concern for Bahamians, as being sellouts. And let me just leave this one before I return in my conclusion to it. Or who characterize some of us as doing the bidding of foreigners and white Bahamians. Mr. Please permit me to do this right here, just for a moment. I've had some, and I don't mean to personalize it, but I really think people would appreciate where I'm going with this. I've had some very bad experiences in the Free National Movement. Some other people here have had some bad experiences too. The new ones are fortunate. They feel it yet. Some members opposite Mr. Deputy Speaker have had some bad experiences in their organization. Yeah. Some of them have been in ministries in charge and couldn't sign nothing. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sometimes a sitting prime minister may send your permanent secretary away. So there's no constitutional signatory, and they take the plum of your ministry. Let's just be hypothetical. Let's just say beaches and park, and put it, or urban renewal, and put it somewhere else. And all, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and all of the pieces that allow you to solidify your base as not the daddy, but the granddaddy of the street is being stripped away from you. So, Mr. Deputy, I'm only using it as an example to make the point that on both sides of the aisle, we have had some grimy experiences. I don't wish to get into the details of it, but I remember a time in an association, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I was selected not once, but twice by the association to be their standard bearer. And despite being selected at least twice, I ended up, I only can tell you the short version. For humor among the family, I can tell you the long version. But I ended up in a seat that I absolutely loved, but it wasn't at that time my first choice. I don't really need to tell you what the outcome of that election was. But not good enough. So, but Mr. Deputy Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, so I went not with pouted mouth, but I went. And I went as a man. Nobody just sent me. I had the option not to go. But I love my people. I love Dowds, where my mother's from. I love it from the north to the south. I love being in UE and Coburn Town, and I absolutely love Rumkey, and still do. And so I went. But the question, and I want my brothers and sisters to get this. These are imperfect organizations. And nobody knows that better than men and women of God. These are people with feet of clay. But I stayed in this organization, and I'm still in this organization. That's one of several experiences. I stayed. Let me give you 3 reasons why. 1, I believed at that time, and still do in hindsight, that the person who was in charge of the Free National Movement was the best option as Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Now, he may not have been the best option for me, for my career, but he was the best option for the country. And I never confused my personal situation with what was in the best interest of the country. I believe he was the best man. And secondly, I believe that I was in the best choice, the best vehicle to deliver the aspirations of the Bahamian people. So I stayed. A great leader, great organization. Infallible, yes. Do some things that are disgusting, you feel? Yes. Best leader, best organization. The third reason I was willing to stay, and I'm still here today, is this is a party that's made up of the true mix of this society. Men and women from different social classes, from those who, like myself, grew up in Angleton, lived through no less than 7 corners in Angleton, lived in Yellow Elder, Mount Pleasant Village, lived in St. Barnabas, lived in Fox Hill. I've lived in so many communities. We simply did not own the homes, so we moved a lot. So ranging from persons like me to Minister Simonet. who, Mr. Deputy, one time, I believe, I don't know if his declaration was 50 million, and I'd asked him back then, I said, you're talking about your ashtray. But here's the point. I want to be on the point. The point is, it is a diverse group of men and women from all social class and ethnicity. Now, I confess, the ethnicity of the cabinet and the party today is not as diverse as it used to be. We certainly need greater representation of women. It is better for our democracy. Secondly, it would be useful to have other ethnicities, because right now we have Mr. Albury, who is partially of Caucasian persuasion, and Mr. Simonet, who is not more than 50%. Tremendous African in his history. I'm not talking about Dio, Folks, and Hannah, and I'm not getting into that. So I stayed. I was talking about the third reason. The third reason I stayed is because we appreciate that we need all Bahamians of different hues to build this country. It doesn't mean that we ought to be passive. A House of Assembly primarily made up of men and women of African descent. We have an absolute obligation to level the playing field. It cannot be right going into the future that our economy is disproportionately owned by persons from distant lands or those who have had historical skin privilege. We have to level the playing field, without question. But what makes us different than what I've heard prior to the election and since the election is that we share the philosophy of Lerone Bennett, who makes the point that we must erase historical biases without introducing new biases. We have an obligation to do that. And so I then find it offensive when persons would want to identify, arguably, a number of Pan-Africanists who understand our history and our people's plight wherever they are in the world, but who are also mature enough to appreciate that all God's children have to work together. And so when I listen to some of the chatter, whether it's on social media or I sometimes listen to it in here, I think it is most unfortunate because we are missing an incredible opportunity to harness the collective talents of our people and not make any group feel as if they don't have a role to play. And if you have an inquiry, or it's clear that someone obtained what they have today by illegal means, and we're able to verify it, I have absolutely no difficulty in supporting a cause to retrieve national resources. None. But for others to represent as if they are one, the paragon of virtue, or two, that they are the gatekeepers for things African, I find it offensive. Because even them still don't understand the history and the imperative to truly empower our people. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in this room are men and women who understand us as a people clearly, who knew that before there was a Greco-Roman civilization, that Europeans went to Africa and found printed history of our legal fraternity, printed, not an oral history, a written history. And there was Kush before there was the Greeks and the Romans. That even when we weren't Christians, we had monotheism because we believed in Amun-Ra. That we understood clearly Pythagoras' theorem before he or his grandparents were born. That when you talk about antiquity, you would find us there.
Indeed.
And so it is offensive to have one group of Africans calling another group of Africans the names that we now do, and not fully appreciating that the greatest traitors are those who try to keep the common men and women of the Bahamas angry with each other, while they and their children are feasting with the very persons they want everybody else to hate. That their children are in boarding schools,
Right.
with very few persons who look like them. And even sometimes when there are those who look like them, they are persons who themselves are often at the top of the pecking order in their country, some African country, and are depressing their very own. And so I'm disappointed that someone would take a paraphrase of my own words to drop on us. Let me see if this sounds a little familiar to you. Them and us. They look like us, sound like us, talk like us, sometimes dress like us, cuss like us, fuss like us, suffered like us, cried like us, walked with us, protested along with us. They were the majority with us, but this was back then. We were sure they were friends. We, the many controlled by the few, feverishly we searched for what to do. Our young school warriors saw our disgust. So quickly, for the vote of victory, they came to us. Starved for freedom, we would gather and pray. Yes, they were with us all the way. They still look like us, sound like us, talk like us, sometimes dress like us, cuss like us, fuss like us. But now they live far from us. Now they victimize us, heavily tax us, ridicule us. They betrayed us. Our trust now is them and us. Oh, sorry, let me, still standing. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker,
You want to sign that and send that?
no problem. So, I'll be happy to table a copy of my book. So Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have to be careful. We have to be careful how we demonize each other. Because the truth of the matter, Mr. Speaker, I should just leave this because I really want to talk about my portfolio. But Mr. Speaker,
It was on your mind, man. No, man. Say it was on your mind.
but Mr. Speaker,
Get off my time.
Mr. Speaker, the most sacred institution in this country is the family. And so let me, because again, you know, I want to be sensitive to my family, but I want to be as transparent as possible. Mr. Speaker, there was a time I was invited to speak at one of the Assemblies of God church. This was, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. I was being asked to speak on abstinence. I was out there, motivational speaker, trainer, etc. I said no 3 times to the youth pastor. And they were not accepting it. And so what I said in the final analysis is, listen, I'm dating a woman, not my present wife, but this was back then, 20 years ago. I said, the person I'm dating, despite our efforts to serve God, we have been intimate, and chances are, before I get married, we can be intimate again. I do not have the moral authority to come and talk to your young people about abstinence. I try not to live in open contradictions, because I believe the job that we are doing requires credibility. And each time I believe I'm functioning in a way that undermines the credibility. I'm not being the most effective husband, father, national leader. And I'm quick to try and repent. I don't want to live in a perpetual state of inconsistency. It is not in our interest. It is not in our interest, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because I've had an occasion in my headquarters before the election to meet with a group of workers, and we had a prayer session. And when I realized some of the challenges people have who work with all of us as members of Parliament, some of the issues they have are so deep, so complex, that there's nothing that an F&M government can do to resolve the person's child who is suicidal. A relationship that is broken, unable to be repaired by our efforts. A person whose heart is working at 30%, but they're there to discuss with you help they need to start a business that is likely to stress them to death. And so you recognize from time to time that there's some divine intervention that is needed to transform their life, that this politics, this party cannot provide. And therefore, it humbles you so that you don't have delusions of grandeur, of how important you are, how indispensable you are, how a special skill you may have matters in the broader scheme of things, because in that most critical moment where somebody needs redemption, it isn't this that provides it. And so Mr. Deputy Speaker, I was simply making this point. The family is the most sacred institution in the country. And I regret I didn't do it much earlier. And I regret times I haven't been there for my family right now. But you know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are some families, despite the incredible love in the beginning, the amazing children born to the union, there are some families that have separated, torn asunder. And the children sometimes suffer, sometimes despite that they've done well. What puzzles me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that despite the love that adults have had, most of us have gone through some relationships and we've let it go. Because somewhere along the line, there were some deal breakers. There were some things that were irreconcilable. See, some things can happen in your relationship that you don't like. We're in cabinet. There's some things that happen, some people in this room do not like it. But it didn't arise to the standard that you were willing to leave the team. It wasn't that fundamental. We just didn't agree. Philosophically, we saw some element of governance different than each other. And it happens every week. Every week. And there's some folks who are not in cabinet but are part of the team, equally as important. And there's some things they just do not like. And more often than some of the folks who are in the room. And with good reason. That's one category of problem. Things you don't like, but you live with it. You pick which battles you engage in. You win some, you lose some. Then there's another category of issues. These are deal breakers. Deal breakers are, they can fall, let me just give you 2 categories, there are many. One category is likely to be where some things happen often enough that you just had it. The very last thing that came up may not be that big, but given the litany of things that have happened, you can say, you know what, I can trade this one in. PM, I got a letter for you. I want you to take this, do what you feel like doing with it, gone.
The straw that breaks the camel's back.
Yes.
But be a man.
Then there's a second example would be, there's sometimes it isn't a litany of things, it's just one thing. But it is so fundamental to who you are that one, you cannot support it at the table or in the group, and two, not only are you not prepared to speak on it, you are prepared to speak against it. Not just once, but consistently. That's a deal breaker. Irreconcilable differences. Remember I said, Mr. Deputy, that sometimes this happens in families and we walk away from somebody we love more than cooked food. We can see life without them. I can understand that in the family I've been on both ends. Pining for somebody and being pined for. It's painful. But what I cannot wrap my mind around is when you have an organization who all of us in here know is an imperfect organization. And if you're a Christian, you know it's men and women with feet of clay. They are given to being fallible. Some unnecessarily, inconsistently fallible. What I cannot understand is why, if you have irreconcilable differences with an organization not nearly as important as a family, where there appears to be no redeeming value, they're not getting anything right. Given 60 minutes plus 5, I cannot find one thing to comment about them that is good. Why? Why would I maintain that relationship, subject myself, my family, to the constant abuse, to my incredible views, which are not shared, by the way, inside? Why would I subject myself to maintaining the relationship?
Why?
Is it that there is a strategic move that I've sought counsel, and counsel has whispered to me that this is not the time to make a move, that your message has greater currency inside, because after all you posture yourself, I am one of you. And so when I speak, you know, it's the same traditional Bahamian refrain that pretext to a very bad situation. That's my friend. And if I tell you this about my friend, it gotta be true. So it's either that counsel has been taken, or endorsements are motivating certain statements. I cannot speak, and I don't speak for the government of the Bahamas. I know my pecking order in the scheme of things. No, we should be having a real talk today. We have a real talk. And so I would only say, I live in Grand Bahama, absolutely love it. I know the people in Grand Bahama. In the deputy, we have some interesting exchanges, and he can tell you. But we learn, despite whatever our exchanges are, we have a greater mission. We're like Nelson Mandela, who came out of prison in 1991, having lost his spouse before he exited, having been deprived of freedom for 27 years. Nelson Mandela was asked a question by a reporter, are you angry? And I said, what a stupid question. I was in Montreal on my couch and I was angry. Nelson Mandela said, I do not have the luxury of being angry. I've been given a mandate by the South African people to create a non-racial society, and that's the mission he was on. And so I would only say that when the relationship has become irreconcilable, if somebody, I want to say, living in Grand Bahama, it is untrue. Every meeting that is held in Grand Bahama that this organization has, there isn't a single member of parliament that cannot attend. Now let's be real. I'm speaking for me. I myself, however, am not going into a private caucus meeting talking about strategy for the transformation of people's lives with someone who is not committed to the same mission. That is fundamentally different. So I want persons to be straight up.
I like where that's going.
And the truth is, let me tell you, I feel qualified to say what I'm saying because I have been the friend in the organization who fought some folks in this room on their behalf. And who have sought to broker arrangements that were made. And nevertheless, the seduction of the attention of the crowd that is so fleeting. For all of us have experienced the glow of the cameras but for a moment, but in the fullness of time, I only want to say for my part, because I can't speak for everybody.
You're speaking for me.
If papers are filed, I will not contest.
No.
Marco City would pay for the separation. I'm not advocating expulsion. I think it would be strategically an error.
Let him go be brave.
But I know one thing. I've been up front and saying what my deal is, what my issues are. But let me say this as I leave this. I don't intend to broadside persons. The leader of the opposition can tell you. If I have something to say to you, I have no difficulty. One time we had a conversation downstairs before the big contest. And our views are very similar. I ain't fooling with you, don't fool with me. You come for me, I come for you. Yes, sir. So all I'm saying is that at some point you have to follow the courage of your conviction. In this room, we know when some things are problematic, when there isn't a particular thing we necessarily like. We fight it in those private rooms. Sometimes some of our colleagues even say it open. If somebody is a backbencher, they have more latitude to say exactly what they want to say on that particular subject. But invariably, they've said it in the room, so you know where they are coming from. And I will fight for their right to continue to do so. But when the time has come where there's no more love in the relationship, where there's no redeeming value, where the team no longer is living up in your estimation to the ideal that is important to you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Ministry of Agriculture colleagues, we all know. Jeff, our member for South Beach, he and I had an interesting revelation. You know, as a talk show host, you could be completely impartial and down the middle. The moment you choose a side that you're going to run with, your whole thing changed. There are people in the public who love you, hate you right away. Oh man, I thought you was. It happens. Mr. Deputy Speaker.